This is Season 4, Episode 17 of my modular journey, and today we're talking about the Afterlater Audio nRings module. Now, nRings is a small, very small version of the Mutable Instruments Rings module that I sold a few years ago. And Rings, by the way, was in the very first order when I finally placed my very first order for modular back in July of 2021. After months of painstaking research, I found out that the plats or plates, if you're American English, plates and rings were the two most popular modules at that moment in time when I was doing my research. So of course I thought that was a no-brainer to pick up plates and Mutable Instruments rings. But as time went on, I needed smaller modules because I was running out of space, so I sold off rings and marbles and veils, and I've picked up their clones here. So that's what these 3 episodes in a row are about, the clones. So here is, with all that aside, here is the Afterlater Audio Nano Rings. Now this module came in also at the beginning of February of 2024, and it cost around $199, so it's a lot cheaper than the Mutable Instruments Rings was. So what is it? Rings is a resonator. And you might ask, what is a resonator? They call this physical modeling whenever I hear someone describing the sound of hitting a tube, or a bell, or glass, or vibrating a string. Beautiful. So it is definitely a very unique sound as compared to, for example, a trumpet or a clarinet. It's the sound of something vibrating, like I'm doing right now. So excited to talk about rings again. But first, let's talk about why I chose Nano Rings. Part of why I sold off the Mutable Instrument stuff was that, one, it was because it was fetching a pretty high price at the time, and then I was running out of space in my cases. So I wanted to try clones that were smaller in stature. As far as how I plan to use it, kind of like this. This is the thing you're going to see me doing a lot with rings or marbles, as I tend to pair these up a lot. I'm going to talk a little bit here about the panel, and then I'm going to try to just make a bunch of noise because talking is not working out for me today, but I want to get this recording done. First thing to discuss is the Polyphony mode up here. That's this top LED up here with 3 different modes. It has a green mode, a amber or orange mode, and a red mode. And when it's in green mode, it's a single voice. So if you strum the resonator, you can hear it play a note, and then you'll hear it. The next strum will cut off the previous note. So if I put it into 2-voice mode here, I'm going to strum it again quickly, and you'll hear at least 2 notes are kind of lingering. Kind of hear that? And then the third one is 4 notes, so I'm going to strum it pretty quick here again, and you'll hear a bunch of notes as Marbles is changing the pitches here. So you can hear there's more than 3 notes. That's the point of polyphony. The next one down is the resonator type. It has 3 modes. It has a modal resonator, which is what you just heard. Kind of like, this is where you get your tubes and your bells and your glassy sounds. And then you have a sympathetic strings mode, which is the amber mode here, and that's a little bit more like strumming or plucking or picking a guitar or some kind of a stringed instrument. Let me bump up the polyphony just because it'll sound better. So you hear those tails hanging out? That's kind of cool. I actually don't finger strum this very often, but I'm doing it just so I like fingering things. I literally could play with this all day long. I think you're getting the idea what some of these modes are. The third mode here is something called modulated or inharmonic strings, and I don't use this red mode too much, so I can't really speak of what it's supposed to sound like, but I'll just play a couple of notes here and we'll see. So that was pretty terrible. Anyway, moving along, starting at the top up here, there's a frequency knob, and that of course is the tuning of the module here. So you can hear what that sounds like. And there's a frequency attenuator here, along with the FM jack down here to modulate frequency if you want to. Give it a little vibrato. Right below that is something called structure, and structure is one of the most expressive parameters in the whole design of rings. In modal mode, it shifts the spacing of the harmonics, morphing from smooth, string-like tones to bright metallic chimes. And then in the other modes, like the sympathetic strings mode, it just changes the harmonics of the note being played. Alright, so you kind of get the idea there. So you've also seen me messing with these other two knobs down here, which is brightness and damping. And brightness is exactly what it sounds like. Let me pull the volt per octave out. I'm going to play a note. You can hear it kind of sounds the way it sounds. Brightness at 12 o'clock. If I raise the brightness, you're going to get more higher harmonics on the note. And of course, if you lower the brightness, it's very muffled, because you're basically like a filter. You're removing the high harmonics. And then damping down below it is, of course, the kind of the length of the tails. If you turn it all the way down, let me go back to modal mode. Now you can hear without any damping, there's literally nothing going on. So the higher the damping goes, the longer the sound rings out. And I didn't realize this before with the rings, all the years I've owned it, is that if you turn the damping all the way up, I think the note will just stay on forever. Or at least a very long time. Longer than I care to force you to listen to anyway. So that's what brightness and damping kind of does. There's another knob here called position. And position, let me see if I can read this right. Position determines where the virtual object is being excited. So it's like plucking near the center of a string versus the edges creates very different overtones. Let me raise my damping and just see if I can rotate this knob. I'm picturing it in my mind as I have this bar here and I'm striking it in the center versus striking it on the edge or the other edge. Something like that. I mean, that's how I picture it mentally. I don't know if that's actually right. But here's the thing that I want to show off for this. I'm going to put myself in the 4-note mode and the sympathetic strings. I'm going to plug in my pitches. I'm going to move my triggers. Let me turn this down until I'm ready. Let me hit up my reverb. I'm going to grab an LFO, a sine LFO out of Modbox, and I'm going to plug it into the position jack here. I want to offset this a little bit, and then I'm going to give it some modulation. So you can kind of hear what it's doing to the sound. If I just slow that down real slow, it doesn't have to be the chorus vibrato kind of thing that I had going on. You can have it just be a slow sine or triangle or anything really. And it's just going to evolve this sound over time. Another thing I like doing is taking a sample and hold or something just varying and plug it into something like brightness. And then offsetting the bright potentiometer here so that way the voltage coming in will change the brightness of the note being played. Like you can have it be mostly dull, but then have a sample and hold come in that's then attenuated to bring up that brightness every once in a while. So I think this is really expressive. I really love listening to this. I say it over and over. I love listening to this all day, every day. I guess I forgot to mention one thing. Damp has a CV, Shape has a CV. Shape is what this is here, structure. On the official Rings module, it's called structure. So there's a CV jacks to modulate all of these things. It's pretty cool. And then right up here above the strum jack is something called in. Now in is when you're supposed to bring a sound in from somewhere else. So let me do that real quick. I'm going to take, let's say, a sawtooth out of quad VCO up top, and I'm going to shove it down in here into the resonator. So again, in my sympathetic string mode, I just plugged a sawtooth into the in jack, and now I'm going to fiddle with some of these knobs. I haven't started strumming yet. This is just the oscillator being resonated. Is that the right word? So if I come up to the oscillator then and start detuning it, it just changes the sound here. I just love how some of this stuff sounds. Barely doing anything. So now I've let Marbles run again. Marbles is not only strumming, but it's also putting volt per octave in, but I still have this oscillator plugged into the in jack, and the oscillator is not changing pitches yet. So let's do that and see what happens. I'll take the second channel out of Marbles up here to the volt per octave in the oscillator. Bring up some reverb. So again, let me pull out the oscillator. So this is what Rings is doing all by itself. And I'm going to plug the oscillator back in. And it just adds this beautiful warmth. Sometimes my breath gets taken away by the subtleties and the nuances of listening to Modular just do whatever it's doing. I'm not really programming it really to do anything super special here. I'm just kind of setting in some modulation, some external audio. And of course, a splash of reverb always makes everything sound better. And I mean, it's these two little modules here. Kara is just making pitches and strums, and all of this sound is coming through Rings. And it just, I don't know, I can't describe the feeling. It's just, it's pure joy. At least for me, I absolutely love it. I think it's a good place to wrap this up because I've already covered Rings in another episode and lots of sonic experiments, so I don't really want to keep rambling on this any longer than I have to. So that's it for Season 4, Episode 17, the Afterlater Audio Nano Rings module. Coming up next, we're going to talk about one more neighbor, the Cloaks here, which is a replacement for the Mutable Instruments Veils module, so stay tuned for that.